If I had to choose one moment to begin this story, I would choose the day I received the graduation confirmation email. A short email, the subject line in all caps. Congratulations, Stefan. Just 2 words, congratulations. And my throat tightened. I was sitting in the university library, that old, worn-out library right in the middle of campus in a small Midwestern town, where autumn turned every maple leaf golden, where students sprawled on the grass in the afternoons, coffee in hand, talking about the future as if it fit neatly in the palm of their hand. I had lived here for 4 years. 4 years long enough for an 18-year-old shy boy to become a 22-year-old man who knew who he was. And I knew who I was. I was Stefan. I was a gay man. And I was in love with another man. Hugo. But on the day that email arrived, Hugo had not yet entered my life. Or more accurately, I had not yet realized he had. Hugo was a freshman. I was a senior with only 1 semester left before I left this place. We met on a September morning, when the sun was still gentle and the air smelled of damp leaves. I was a teaching assistant for Intro to Communications, a small job to help pay rent and also a way for me to delay my fear of the future. Hugo walked into class late. The door opened, light pouring in behind him. Dark brown hair slightly messy, backpack slung loosely over one shoulder. He looked around, flustered, until his eyes landed on me, standing beside the lectern. "Sorry, I got lost," he said, his voice a little hoarse. The whole class chuckled. I just nodded. "Find a seat. We're just getting started." But my heart was not just getting started. It skipped a beat. I had been in love before. Shattered little romances. Nights lying awake listening to cars pass outside the window, wondering why I was never enough for someone to stay. I had learned to keep my distance, especially from freshmen, those still figuring out who they were. But there was something about Hugo. Maybe the way he bit his lip when he concentrated on taking notes. Maybe those eyes, too clear, too honest. Or maybe because I saw my own 4 years younger self in him. 2 weeks later, Hugo stayed after class. I was packing up my materials when I heard slow footsteps behind me. "Stefan." The way he said my name felt both hesitant and intimate. "Yeah, I wanted to ask something. Not about the class." I looked up. He took a deep breath. "Is there an LGBTQ club on campus?" The question hung between us. I don't know why, but my throat went dry. Maybe because I understood that the question wasn't really about a club. "Yes," I answered in English, but inside my head I translated it into another language, the language of recognition. "And I'm part of it." Hugo's eyes lit up, then dimmed again. "I'm not out," he said softly. "Not to my parents. Not to anyone here." I smiled, gentler than I intended. "You don't have to be out to belong." He looked at me like I had just thrown him a life preserver in the middle of the ocean. And in that moment, I knew I was stepping into dangerous territory. We started talking more after class. At first about assignments, then movies, then music. Hugo loved indie music, the kind of bands you only discover scrolling Spotify at 3 in the morning. One Friday evening, I ran into him at the cafe near the dorms. "Stefan." He waved. I should have just nodded and kept walking. But I sat down. We talked for 2 hours. About Hugo growing up in a tiny Texas town where the church was bigger than the supermarket. About how he had known he was different since he was 13 but never dared say it out loud. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Scared of the whole world looking at me." I looked at him, the warm cafe light reflecting on his cheekbones. "I was scared too," I said. But then I realized, the whole world can look, but they don't live your life. Hugo stayed quiet. "The whole world looks," I continued, "but we don't have to care." He smiled. A small smile, but enough to make my heart stutter. I don't know exactly when caring turned into longing. Maybe the night we walked back to the dorms together, our shoulders brushing. Maybe when he texted at midnight, "Are you awake?" Or maybe when I caught his gaze lingering on my lips longer than usual. But I knew one thing. I was falling into something I wasn't sure I had the right to touch. I was about to graduate. I had plans to leave this town, move to Chicago, start a new job. I had promised myself I wouldn't begin anything serious in my final semester. And Hugo, he was only just beginning. I didn't want to become a beautiful but unfinished memory in his life. Yet every time Hugo smiled, my reason wavered. One night, after an LGBTQ club meeting, we stayed behind to clean up. The room was empty. Outside the window, the wind blew hard, dry leaves swirling. Hugo stood very close to me. "Stefan," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "if I tell you something, will you promise not to pull away?" My heart pounded. "Depends on what you're about to say." He looked straight into my eyes. "I think I like you. Not, I think I like boys. Not, I think I'm gay. But, I think I like you." And in that moment, I knew everything was about to change. I had heard people say there are sentences that change your entire life. "I think I like you." Hugo didn't say it like a dramatic confession. There was no soundtrack, no spotlight. Just the small LGBTQ club meeting room, the lingering smell of paper and dry erase markers, and the eyes of an 18-year-old boy looking at me as if I were the most important thing in his world. I should have stepped back. I was a senior. I was 4 years older. I was about to leave this town. I had promised myself I wouldn't let my heart get tangled in anything too complicated. But instead of stepping back, I stayed still. "Hugo," I began, my voice hoarse. He waited. I saw his shoulders tense, as if ready for rejection. "I like you too," I said. The words left my lips, and the air in the room seemed to thicken. Hugo exhaled, so softly it was almost silent. Then he smiled, a smile both relieved and radiant. "Really? Really?" We didn't kiss that night. There was no movie romance scene. We just stood there, very close, our hands almost touching but still keeping that fragile distance of people who had just crossed a line. And maybe that very distance made everything more intense. The week that followed was a string of small but electric moments. Midnight texts. "Are you thinking about me?" "Maybe." "That's not an answer." "Then yes." Accidental hand brushes while crossing the street. Eyes finding each other across crowded campus lawns. This college town wasn't big. Rumors spread faster than the autumn wind. But we still hadn't made anything public. Hugo wasn't ready. One evening, we sat on the grass behind the library. The sky was clear, full of stars. In the distance, music drifted from a frat party. "I've never dated anyone," Hugo said, leaning back on his hands, staring at the sky. "Never?" I asked. "Never a guy. And I don't want my first time to be a shameful secret." Those words left me silent. "I'm not ashamed of you," I said slowly. "I know." He turned to look at me. "But I'm still scared." I understood that fear. I remembered my own freshman year. Nights lying in the dorm listening to my roommate talk about his girlfriend while I pretended to sleep. I remembered the first time I held a boy's hand in a dark movie theater. My heart pounding so hard I thought it would jump out of my chest in case anyone saw. "I don't want the whole world deciding for us," Hugo whispered. I leaned toward him. "The whole world can look, but they don't live this life. Only we do." Hugo didn't answer, but he shifted closer. And for the first time, our hands intertwined. Our first kiss happened on a rainy afternoon. We took shelter under the awning of the communications building. The whole campus was almost empty because of the sudden downpour. Hugo was soaked, hair plastered to his forehead. He laughed from the cold. "Texas doesn't prepare you for Midwest rain," he said. I reached out and brushed the wet strands from his eyes. That moment stretched longer than it should have. I could feel his breath on my lips. "Hugo," I whispered. He said nothing. He just moved closer. Our first kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't passionate. It was slow, exploratory, as if both of us needed to make sure this wasn't a dream. His lips were soft. His breath trembled slightly. I placed my hand on his waist and pulled him a little closer. The feeling, that closeness between two male bodies, was both familiar and completely new to Hugo. When we pulled apart, he looked at me with wide eyes. "Wow," he breathed. I laughed. "Is that a good wow?" "The best wow." But love on a college campus was never just romantic moments. Rumors started. I caught snippets in the hallway. Two sophomores whispering as I walked past. Isn't he graduating? Yeah. And that freshman, what's his name? I tried to act like I didn't hear, but Hugo was different. One evening, he came to my apartment, face pale. They were talking about us, he said. Who? Some guys from my dorm. They asked if I was your boy toy. I clenched my fists. What did you say? I laughed, pretended I didn't know what they meant. In that moment, I felt the difference between us clearly. I was used to the whispers. I had been openly gay since sophomore year. I had learned how to face it. Hugo hadn't. I don't want you to have to deal with pressure because of me, I said. He looked at me, eyes full of hurt and anger. Don't you dare make this about protecting me, he said. I'm with you because I want to be, not because I need saving. Those words stopped me cold. Hugo was no longer the lost boy from the first day of class. He was growing up, and I was watching it happen. That night, we lay next to each other on my small couch. Nothing too far. Just touches, kisses. My hands sliding along his back, feeling every breath. I don't care what they say, Hugo whispered against my neck. Me neither. The whole world looks. He repeated my words. We don't care, I finished. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Because in just a few months, I would be gone. And for the first time since we began, I wondered, would this love be strong enough to survive the distance? There's one thing no one tells you about senior year. It isn't just the goodbye parties, the cap and gown photos, and the promises to keep in touch. It's the feeling that everything is slowly slipping through your fingers no matter how tightly you hold on. October passed faster than I wanted. Hugo was settling into college life. He had new friends, study groups, late-night gaming sessions in the dorm with loud laughter. I watched him fit in, watched his eyes lose some of their hesitation. And I was proud. But alongside that pride was a vague fear. I was no longer the center of his world. And I hated that I even thought that. One Saturday night, I went to an acoustic music showcase organized by the arts department. Hugo had texted me earlier, you should come. I might do something stupid. When I arrived, the small auditorium was packed with students. Dim lights, warm and noisy atmosphere. Then I saw him on stage. Hugo holding a guitar. White button-up shirt with sleeves rolled up, hair neater than usual. He looked down at the strings, took a deep breath, and began to sing. His voice wasn't perfect, but it was captivating. The song was about growing up in a small town, about trying to be someone else just to be accepted. And at the final chorus, he looked up. His eyes found mine in the crowd, and stayed there. My heart clenched. It wasn't just a performance. It was a confession. When the song ended, the whole room erupted in applause. I stood up and clapped harder than anyone. After the show, Hugo ran down to me, face flushed. Well, he asked. I think you just did the stupidest and bravest thing, I said. He laughed, then suddenly hugged me right there in the crowded hallway. Not a sneaky hug, not a quick one then let go, but a real tight hug. A few people looked. I saw them looking, but Hugo didn't let go, and neither did I. In the days that followed, we stopped trying to hide as much. We sat side by side in the cafe, hands touching. We walked across campus in the evenings, shoulders brushing. There were curious glances. There were giggles. There were half-joking comments. But there were also supportive smiles. A girl from my class stopped me after lecture and whispered, "You two are cute." I laughed. Goo. A simple word, but it made me lighter than I wanted to admit. Then one afternoon, Hugo said, I told my roommate. I looked up from my laptop. And he said he already knew. I snorted. Of course he did. Hugo sat down across from me. I didn't say your name. Just that I'm seeing someone. Those words made me pause. Seeing someone, I repeated. He noticed the slight change in my tone. I wasn't ready to say more, Hugo said quickly. Not because I'm ashamed. It's still new. I knew I had no right to ask for more. But in that moment, I realized I had gone further than I had planned. I didn't just like Hugo. I loved him. I realized it on a cold night at the end of November. We were lying in my bed, window cracked open, the wind carrying the scent of approaching winter. Hugo rested his head on my chest, his fingers tracing unconscious circles on my stomach. "Stefan?" he whispered. "Yeah. What happens after you graduate?" The question hung in the darkness. I had been avoiding it for weeks. "I moved to Chicago," I said slowly. "The job starts in July." "And us?" I swallowed. "We can try long distance," I said. But even I heard the hesitation in my voice. Hugo looked up at me. "Do you want to try?" he asked. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I was scared. Scared of long distance. Scared of becoming a voice on the phone. Scared of watching Hugo continue his college life while I was stuck in a new apartment hundreds of miles away. But when I looked into his eyes, I knew the only answer I could live with was, yes. He exhaled, as if he had been holding his breath. "Then we'll try," Hugo said. Then he kissed me. This time there was no hesitation. This time it was deeper, more intense, as if both of us understood that our time here was running out. I pulled him closer, my hands sliding down his spine, feeling the warmth of his body beneath the thin t-shirt. Hugo trembled slightly, but not from cold. That night we went further. No rus, no noise. Just two boys finding each other in the dark, learning to touch with respect and desire intertwined. Shortened breaths, whispered names. And when we lay still afterward, sweat still on our skin, Hugo whispered, "I'm not scared when I'm with you." Those words made me both happy and heartbroken, because I knew I couldn't stay beside him like this forever. Out there, the whole world was still looking, and for the first time I wondered, were we really not caring, or were we just pretending to be strong? December arrived with biting cold and final exam pressure. The campus was covered in the season's first thin layer of snow. Bare tree branches cast shadows on the gray sky. Students hurried between buildings, arms full of books, headphones on, eyes glued to thick exam schedules. And I began counting down. Every day felt like one step closer to leaving Hugo. We tried to live normally, studying together in the library, eating midnight pizza, arguing over who made better coffee. But beneath the calm surface was a simmering tension. One evening, while we were studying in my room, Hugo's phone kept buzzing. He looked at the screen and froze. "It's my mom," he said. I saw his shoulders stiffen. "Everything okay?" "I don't know." Hugo stood up and went out to the balcony to answer. I watched through the glass. Snow fell lightly around him. He spoke very quietly, but I could see his expression change. First normal, then a frown, then silence. When he came back inside, his eyes were red. "Hugo," I stood up. "My mom heard from an acquaintance that there are rumors I'm dating a guy." My heart dropped into my stomach. She asked me straight out if I was gay. I moved closer. "What did you say?" Hugo looked at me, eyes full of panic. I said no. That answer stabbed me like a cold needle. I knew he wasn't out. I knew his family was conservative. But hearing him say no out loud still choked me. "I'm sorry," Hugo said immediately when he saw my expression change. I panicked. I wasn't ready. I turned away for a few seconds, trying to stay calm. "I'm not angry at you," I said slowly. "I just wish you didn't have to deny yourself." Hugo stepped forward and took my hand. "I wasn't denying you," he said, voice shaking. "I was protecting myself, and I understood. But understanding didn't mean it didn't hurt." In the days that followed, a new silence settled between us. Not physical distance. We still slept together, still kissed before I went home. But something fragile had been touched. I started thinking about Chicago more. About the apartment I had put a deposit on. About the new job at a big communications company. About a life where no one knew me. And I wondered, would leaving be easier than I thought? 1 week before winter break, the school held the Christmas tree lighting ceremony. The whole campus glowed with golden lights. Music played from outdoor speakers. Students gathered in groups, holding hot chocolate. Hugo stood beside me, wearing the scarf I had bought him. "Cold?" I asked. A little. I pulled him closer. We stood in the middle of the crowd, lights reflecting on the snow. Behind us, a group of students began singing familiar carols. Hugo turned to look at me. "Do you ever wish we had met earlier?" he asked. I smiled sadly. "Every day. Or later," he continued. "Maybe that too." He was quiet for a moment. "I don't want to lose you," Hugo said. Those words were so direct they caught me off guard. "You won't?" I answered immediately, even though doubt filled my chest. "Promise." I looked at him. I had made promises before, to others, and I had broken them. But with Hugo, I didn't want to lie. "I promise I'll fight," I said. "But love isn't just promises. It's choices." Hugo nodded. Then, in the glow of the lights and the sound of music, he kissed me. Not secretly, not rushed. A clear kiss, in front of dozens of eyes. I heard someone whistle behind us, heard a few laughs, but I also heard scattered applause. When we pulled apart, Hugo smiled. "Let them look," he said. And for the first time since we started loving each other, I believed he truly wasn't afraid anymore. But life never lets you enjoy happiness for too long without testing you. 2 days before break, I received an email from the company in Chicago. They wanted me to start earlier, in May, not July. That meant I would leave right after graduation. No summer left in this town. No extra months with Hugo. I stared at my laptop screen for a long time. Then I texted him, "Can you come over?" When Hugo arrived, I didn't beat around the bush. "They want me to move in May." He stood frozen. "That's sooner." "Yeah." The room fell silent. "So this is it?" Hugo asked. "No," I said quickly. "It's just earlier. But it feels like it." I stepped closer. "Hugo, do you want to go?" He cut me off. The question caught in my throat. It was the opportunity one had dreamed of. Dream job. Dream city. And also the thing that could pull me away from him. "Yes," I said honestly. Hugo nodded slowly. "Then you should." No tears. No drama. Just two people standing face to face, understanding that love doesn't always win against timing. That night, we held each other for a long time, and I began to feel clearly what I had only vaguely sensed before. Maybe the whole world looking didn't matter, but distance did. Winter break came fast and cruel. The dorms emptied. The campus was deserted. Only snow and tire tracks on the roads. Hugo flew back to Texas. I stayed a few extra days to finish my TA duties before heading home to my family in Ohio. We kissed at the small-town airport. Not too long, but long enough to make the goodbye hurt. "Text me when you land," I said. "I will." He walked through security, then looked back at me one last time, and I suddenly understood. Loving someone means accepting the moment they turn their back and walk away, believing they will come back. The days without Hugo were long. At first, we texted constantly, video calls every night. He told me about tense family dinners, about his mother's probing eyes. I told him about the new job, about finding a roommate in Chicago. But some calls ended in silence. One night, when I asked, "Did you tell them?" Hugo shook his head. "Not yet. Will you?" "I don't know." I didn't push, but I felt an invisible distance growing. When we returned to campus in January, something had changed. Not the feelings. I still loved him, still wanted to touch him every time he was near. But the reality of my departure was now more present than ever. We started talking about plans, video call schedules, visit schedules, cheap flight tickets. It sounded more like a project than a romance. One night, lying beside each other, Hugo asked, "Are you scared?" "Of what?" "Of me changing." The question made me open my eyes and stare at the ceiling. "Yes," I admitted, "and I'm scared of me changing too." Hugo propped himself up on one elbow, looking at me intently. "I don't want you to freeze your life for me," he said. "I don't want to be the reason you hesitate in Chicago." "You're not a burden," I replied. "I know, but I don't want to be an anchor either." He said it so calmly it hurt. February brought cold winds and job search pressure for my classmates. I was busier. Online interviews, resume prep, meeting mentors. Hugo was busy too. He joined the music club, made new friends. There were evenings he couldn't come over. At first I said I understood. But then one night, when I waited for a good night text that never came, I realized I was jealous of his life. I wasn't proud of that. Everything exploded one Sunday afternoon. We had arranged to meet at our usual cafe. I arrived first and saw Hugo sitting with two guys from his dorm. They were laughing loudly. When I approached, one of them looked at me, then at Hugo. "Oh, so this is the senior?" he said, half joking. Hugo smiled awkwardly. I sat down, trying to stay calm. The conversation was strained. Then one of them said, "So when are you leaving? May, right? Guess Hugo will be free again." Those words landed like a punch. Hugo didn't push back immediately. He just smiled faintly, and that hurt me more than any words could. After they left, I turned to him. "Free again?" Hugo sighed. "They were joking. You didn't say anything." What was I supposed to say? Announce to the whole cafe that we're in a long-distance plan. Maybe just say I'm not disposable. The words flew out before I could stop them. Hugo froze. "You think I see you as disposable?" His voice trembled. "I don't know," I answered, anger and fear mixing. "Sometimes it feels like I'm just a chapter." Silence. People around us kept laughing and talking. We sat there, two separate worlds. "I never asked you to fall in love with me right before leaving," Hugo said quietly. Those words cut deep. "Neither did I," I replied. We left the cafe without touching. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything. About the first time he asked about the LGBTQ club. About the kiss in the rain. About the Christmas tree lighting. I had thought our love was strong enough to survive the eyes of others. But I forgot. The biggest challenge wasn't the whole world. It was the fear inside each of us. Fear of being left behind. Fear of not being enough. Fear of becoming a memory. The next morning, Hugo knocked on my apartment door. His eyes were red. "Can we not end like this?" he asked. I pulled him inside. We stood very close, but didn't touch. "I don't want to lose you," I said. "Then don't push me away because you're scared," Hugo answered. I closed my eyes. "I love you," I said for the first time. Not in a text. Not whispered in the dark. But clearly in daylight. Hugo took a deep breath. "I love you too." We hugged. This time not out of passion, but out of choice. Because no matter how the world looked, no matter how uncertain the future, we still chose to stay. At least for today. But was love alone enough? Or would we soon have to choose between each other and our own dreams? After that fight, everything between us became more honest. No more illusions that love was only kisses in the snow or whispered names in the dark. We started talking about the ugly things. About jealousy. About fear. About who would be the one to call first when the missing became unbearable. March arrived with cold rain and the official announcement of graduation. I received my cap and gown in a room packed with seniors. When I held the outfit in my hands, it felt like touching a period at the end of a sentence. That evening, I brought it back to the apartment. Hugo was sitting on the floor, back against the couch, reading. "I have this," I said. He looked up, then stood when he saw the gown. "Oh, just one, oh." But it contained everything. He stepped closer, touching the fabric. "You're really leaving?" "Yeah." It was no longer some distant future. No longer later. It was a few weeks away. Hugo looked at me for a long time. "Can I try it on?" he asked, trying to smile. I laughed. "It's a bit big. So are your sweaters." He put the gown on, turning slowly. The hem nearly reached his ankles. "You look ridiculous," I said. "You look like someone about to break my heart," he replied softly. Those words silenced both of us. 1 week later, Hugo made a decision I never expected. He told his mother. Not by text, not by email, but in a phone call that lasted nearly an hour. I sat in the room, listening through the wall. His voice shook, then rose, then went quiet. When he came out, his eyes were red, but he wasn't crying. She didn't take it well, Hugo said. I walked over and took his hand. But she didn't hang up. I squeezed tighter. She said she needs time. Time is better than silence, I whispered. Hugo looked at me. I told her about you. My heart stopped. What did you say? That you're kind. That you make me brave. That when I'm with you, I don't feel broken. My throat tightened. I don't want to be a secret anymore, Hugo said. Even if you leave, I'm still me. In that moment, I realized he was no longer the boy afraid of the whole world looking. He was learning to stand tall in front of it. But growing up didn't mean it didn't hurt. The night before graduation, we lay beside each other for the last time in my small apartment. Cardboard boxes were stacked neatly in the corner. Books were packed. The photo we took at the Christmas tree lighting sat on the table. Tomorrow, Hugo said, voice hoarse. Tomorrow. We didn't speak for a long time after that. I stroked his hair, remembering the first time I met him in class, when he got lost and apologized to everyone. I don't regret us, Hugo said. Me neither. Even if it hurts? Especially because it hurts. He looked up, memorizing every line of my face. Promise me something, Hugo whispered. What? Don't turn this into a beautiful tragedy. I frowned. Don't tell people I was your college love, and that's it. Don't box me into a memory. I took a deep breath. Then what do you want us to be? Hugo placed his hand on my chest. A choice. Every day. Even when it's inconvenient. I understood. Long distance wasn't a romance that naturally succeeded. It was tired phone calls. It was turning down easy flirtations. It was trusting when you couldn't see the other person. I choose you, I said. Hugo smiled, then kissed me. That night we made love as if not to hold on, but to etch it deep. No rus. No desesperación. Just two familiar bodies finding each other once more, learning to remember every breath, every soft moan, every touch. And when we lay still afterward, I understood. Love isn't about holding tight. It's about trusting enough to let go and still stay connected. Graduation day was sunny. The stadium was full. Families, friends, cameras clicking nonstop. I walked across the stage when my name was called. Stephen Miller. I heard the applause. And in the sea of people, I saw Hugo. He stood up, clapping harder than anyone. His eyes didn't avoid a single gaze. The whole world was looking, and we didn't care. But when the ceremony ended, when everyone started hugging and congratulating, I knew. The real test was only beginning. That afternoon, I drove out of town. Hugo stood on the roadside, hands in his pockets, trying to smile. I rolled down the window. Call me when you get home, he said. I will. We didn't cry. We just looked at each other for a long time. Then I stepped on the gas. In the rearview mirror, his figure grew smaller. And I wondered, would our love be big enough to cross hundreds of miles? Or in the end, were we just two boys who loved each other for one college season? Chicago greeted me with strong winds and skyscrapers so tall they made me feel tiny. My new apartment on the 12th floor looked down on a street that was always noisy. Buses, horns, people talking on the sidewalks. Everything moved nonstop, unlike the college town where evenings could be so quiet you could hear leaves fall. On my first day of work, I wore a new shirt and a perfectly tied tie. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a more grown-up version. But when I came home, took off my shoes, tossed the keys on the table, that maturity vanished. The apartment was too quiet. I called Hugo. He picked up almost immediately. How's the big city? He asked. Loud, I answered. And lonely. Hugo was silent for a second. I miss you, he said. I know. Not me too. But I know. Because I missed him until it hurt. The first week passed like a whirlwind. Meetings, getting to know colleagues, networking lunches. I tried to fit in. There was a colleague named Mark, a few years older, friendly and confident. One evening, he invited me out for drinks after work. You're new. You need to see the real Chicago, he smiled. We went to a crowded bar. Neon blue and purple lights. Pulsing electronic music. Mark leaned closer. So, Are you seeing anyone? A simple question. But my heart stopped. I could say, it's complicated. I could say, not really. I could dodge. I have a boyfriend, I said clearly. The word boyfriend sounded both strange and right in my mouth. Mark raised an eyebrow. Long distance. Yeah. He nodded. That's hard. I know. That night when I got home, I called Hugo and told him. I'm proud of you, Hugo said. For what? For not shrinking. I smiled. We were learning how to love from afar. But long distance wasn't just sweet phone calls. There were days Hugo stayed late at band practice while I was so tired I fell asleep before our video call time. There were messages read but not replied to right away. Small things started to pile up. One evening, I saw a photo on Hugo's Instagram. Him with his new group of friends. A guy standing very close, arm around his shoulder. I stared at that photo longer than I should have. When I called Hugo, I tried to sound normal. Nice picture, I said. Oh, that? Just the band guys. Who's the one next to you? Hugo sighed. Stefan. I'm just asking. He's straight. That doesn't mean anything. Silence. Then Hugo said, if you don't trust me, say it. I closed my eyes. Ido. I'm just far away. Those words weren't an accusation. Just the truth. The second month apart was the hardest. We started arguing over little things. About who should call first. About who was busier. About whether our future was really clear or just vague hope. One night, after a tiring argument, Hugo said, maybe love isn't enough. Those words sent a chill down my spine. Don't, I said. I'm not saying I don't love you, he hurried. I'm saying, sometimes I feel like we're holding on because we're scared to let go. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone pressed to my ear. Are you scared to let go? I asked. Hugo was silent for a very long time. No, he said finally. I'm scared of losing what we could be. I exhaled. Then don't give up on the could be. 3 months after I left, I bought a plane ticket to visit. I didn't tell Hugo in advance. When he opened the door to his dorm room and saw me standing there, suitcase in hand, he froze for a few seconds. Are you real? He whispered. Very. He threw himself into my arms, so tight I couldn't breathe. I breathed in the familiar scent of his shampoo, felt his heartbeat against my chest. The hundreds of miles vanished in one hug. That night we walked around campus. Everything was the same. The old buildings, wide lawns, golden lights. But we were different, more grown, less naive. Do you still choose me? Hugo asked as we sat on the library steps. I looked at him. The lost freshman from that first day was now more confident, standing straighter, no longer avoiding anyone's gaze. Yes, I said, even when it's hard. Hugo nodded. Me too. We kissed, not to prove anything, not to challenge anyone, just to remind ourselves that the whole world can look. Distance can test us. Time can change us. But every day we can still choose each other. And this time I no longer asked if love was enough. Because I finally understood. Love by itself is not enough. But two people willing to fight for it can be.